from New York, where I am just for today. Yesterday, of course, I was in Washington, D.C., and the last 2 days, and tonight I'll be going back to Florida to our Priests for Life headquarters. And many of you, I'm sure, followed our broadcasts from Washington, D.C. over the last couple of days, and it sure was a marvelous experience being there as the Supreme Court of the United States heard the case, June Medical Services, regarding an abortion-related law coming out of the state of Louisiana. Those who watched over the last 2 days, and I know we had a great audience, received a lot of information about this case, heard from a lot of experts and a lot of our colleagues in pro-life leadership, and I want to ask you to continue to spread that information, spread that understanding, share those videos, help people to know what's really at stake in this particular case and this particular court decision that we expect to be handed down sometime at the end of June. Between now and then, we'll be doing a lot to educate our movement about the implications of this decision, of this case. But today, friends, I want to respond to the absolutely reprehensible behavior of Senator Chuck Schumer yesterday. I was right there. In fact, we may have even captured his comments on our broadcast yesterday from the front of the Supreme Court, where there were two competing rallies taking place. And I was only yards away from the platform where Senator Chuck Schumer and other pro-abortion extremists spoke. I saw a number of these people coming to the stage. Representative Rashida Tlaib, for example, at one point walked right by me, and they had all the who's who of radicals in our country coming there. So, but there were competing rallies. I was standing right next to where the pro-abortion rally was going on. I was leading our educational broadcasts about this whole issue, and then various pro-life speakers, members of Congress, senators, pro-life leaders of all types, speaking on the platform right next to me on the other side. And Schumer got up there and he started yelling about, oh, they're taking away our fundamental rights, he said. And then he started pointing to the Supreme Court, and he threatened by name Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, the two newest Supreme Court justices, appointed and placed there by President Donald Trump, confirmed by the U.S. Senate, Republican-led Senate. And Schumer actually threatened them. He threatened them if they advance these terrible decisions. He said that they would come after them. You won't know what hit you. He said there would be, you unleash the whirlwind. He used all this kind of language that could not be described in any other way than a threat. And Justice John Roberts actually responded later in the day and called these comments dangerous. They're certainly highly inappropriate for a high-placed government official to be threatening members of the Supreme Court based on the way that he thinks that they are going to rule in a particular case. We have, and we are supposed to have, an independent judiciary. There's a reason why the Supreme Court justices wear black. They are not supposed to be red or blue. They are not supposed to be beholden to, like politicians or elected lawmakers are, to the views of their constituents, because their only role is judgment. Their role is not to pass laws. Their role is not to enforce laws. Their role is not to do away with laws. Their role is simply a role of judgment. Does this law correspond to the Constitution for the parties that have come before the case with some dispute? Article 3 of the Constitution says that the courts resolve cases and controversies. So the parties that go before the courts do so to defend their own legal rights, to claim the need to restore particular damages that have been done to those rights, and the court has to make a judgment. How does the law apply to these individuals? Has a party been harmed? How is that party to be further protected? That's the role of the court, and therefore they have to be independent. They have to answer to the law and to the Constitution. Not to the Democrat Party, not to a senator who happens not to like the direction that the court is going. You know, this arrogant, dangerous, inappropriate series of threats that Senator Schumer made just yesterday there in front of the Supreme Court really shows not just his arrogance and ignorance, but it really shows how desperate the other side is. It really shows how desperate the left is and how desperate the Democrats are. They see things moving in the wrong direction, what they consider the wrong direction. They see the courts being transformed, not just the Supreme Court with these two new justices, but also the over 200 federal judges that the president has placed on the other federal courts. They see this, they don't like it, and they're afraid. Now, at the same time, I want to address the substance of what he is saying. He says, oh, they're taking away our fundamental rights. Well, the case that was being argued yesterday, this June medical services case out of Louisiana, does not take away any fundamental rights. The law that Louisiana passed is called the Unsafe Abortion Protection Act. Protection of the mothers that go to the abortion facilities and protecting them from unsafe abortions. Why? Well, for example, the law that they passed would require better credentialing of the abortionists. One of the abortion facilities there in Louisiana hired a radiologist to do abortions and an ophthalmologist to do abortions. And are these people even qualified to know the methods and risks of an abortion or how to deal with the complications? The abortion facilities in Louisiana have far less rigorous credentialing than the hospitals do. So if the abortionist has to get hospital admitting privileges at a local hospital, they're better credentialed. Louisiana has a long history of health and safety violations in their abortion facilities. We're talking about untrained staff, unqualified staff, expired medicines and medical equipment, lack of emergency medical equipment, unsanitary and unsafe conditions in the facilities, lack of monitoring of patients' vital signs, lack of keeping accurate medical records or properly following protocols for the administration of certain drugs. This is what we see, and the record shows, we've seen this for decades in the Louisiana abortion facilities, and the legislators of Louisiana, looking at this situation, decided what had to be done for the protection of the women of Louisiana. Now, shouldn't that be the prerogative of the elected lawmakers of Louisiana? I had a conversation yesterday. In fact, we did an interview, you'll see it on our channels here, with the Attorney General of Louisiana. I sat down with Attorney General Jeff Landry and we spoke about the fact that the courts really should be giving deference to the lawmakers. Now, Schumer should know this as well as anybody because he's a lawmaker himself. Does he want the Supreme Court taking the place of what he does when he casts a vote for a particular law in the United States Senate? Or does he want to be able to carry out his duties under Article 1 of the Constitution, just like the judges under Article 3 of the Constitution should carry out their duties, and just like the president under Article 2 should carry out his? No, Schumer doesn't want the court interfering with or second-guessing his legislative judgment. So why should he want the court second-guessing the legislative judgment of the legislators of Louisiana? The fact of the matter is the legislators of Louisiana made their decision and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld their law. So it was the abortionists, it was Schumer's friends who put this case into the hands of the very justices that he's threatening. It was Schumer's friends, it was Schumer's movement, it was Schumer's abortion industry that put this case into the hands of Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and their 7 other colleagues on the U.S. Supreme Court. They brought it to the court. They didn't have to do that. It was the abortionists who brought this case to the court. And Schumer is going to complain that they're taking away fundamental rights and start threatening them for doing a job that the abortionists dropped in their lap? Not a single woman from Louisiana brought this case before the court. Not a single woman in Louisiana who was seeking an abortion complained that the law that is meant to protect her health and safety was a problem for her. Not a single one. And Schumer wants to say, oh, they're taking away their fundamental rights. This law does not prohibit a single abortion. This law says that if you go to an abortion facility in Louisiana, you need to be treated by a doctor who's qualified. You need to be treated by a doctor who can follow up with you in case you have a medical emergency there and need to be brought to a hospital. You need to be treated in ways that correspond to the already existing laws in Louisiana covering other doctors, other medical facilities, and other medical procedures. You can still get an abortion, according to the law, in the very same place that you would have gone before. What is it that Schumer is even talking about when he says they are taking away our fundamental rights? He's talking fantasy. You see, he and his pro-abortion extremist colleagues throughout the Democrat Party, they want abortion to be considered as a fundamental right. But guess who disagrees with them? Not only us in the pro-life movement and in the church. You know who also disagrees with them that abortion is a fundamental right? The U.S. Supreme Court. You see, the court has ruled dozens of times on abortion, and in those dozens of rulings over the years since Roe versus Wade, has changed the standard of review. For those of you who know something about constitutional law, you'll understand what I mean when I say that the standard of review has shifted and has been very inconsistent in the writings of the Supreme Court, from looking at abortion as a fundamental right, which it only mentions it like that a couple of times, which then any law regulating it would have to abide by the standard of what's called strict scrutiny. In other words, the government would not be able to limit or regulate that right unless it was the least restrictive way of advancing a compelling government interest. But instead, the court has shifted that review to say, well, states may regulate abortion in a lot of different ways. They may regulate it, and Roe v. Wade itself said this, they may regulate it to make sure that the abortion is carried out for maximum safety of the woman. And it said that the physicians are responsible for that. So Louisiana is really just following Roe v. Wade. It's not taking away a fundamental right, Schumer. It's following Roe v. Wade. Maybe if you sat down and read it for a few minutes without ranting and raving about your pro-abortion extremism, just sit down and read Roe v. Wade, and you tell me what it means when it says that the state may regulate this procedure in a way that ensures that abortion is carried out for the maximum safety of the patient. Taking away our fundamental rights. What kind of nonsense is this? Does he think we're stupid? He knows better, brothers and sisters. He is trying to inflame the people of this country. He's trying to inflame his friends on the left. All their radical, out of control, wacko policies, destructive not only of the unborn but of America. He wants to inflame them and make them think. Oh, and this is good for their fundraising too, by the way, all these pro-abortion groups. He wants to make them think the sky is falling and Roe v. Wade is going to be reversed tomorrow. That's not what's happening here. That's not what is at stake here. That's not what Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and the other 7 justices were debating yesterday. That's not at issue. What's at issue is how far may the state go to protect women who go to get abortions? And how much are those protections going to, quote unquote, burden their access to abortion? Well, you know what? None of the women of Louisiana is complaining. It's the abortionists, once again, who put this case in the hands of Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and the others. Not taking away fundamental rights. The court does not consider abortion to be a fundamental right. They consider it to be legal, but that's different from fundamental right. We know they don't consider it to be a fundamental right because the standard of review is not strict scrutiny. The standard of review is undue burden. Does a particular measure create an undue burden? And as we discussed at length yesterday and the day before, this particular Louisiana law does not. Because the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, when they upheld the law, they said at most it would burden about 30% of the women getting abortions in Louisiana by making it maybe a delay of 1 hour at the abortion facility, one of the 3 abortion facilities where they would go to get this procedure. That's hardly an undue burden on all the women for whom it's applicable in the state. So for him to stand there, first of all, and threaten Supreme Court justices, that is not only inappropriate and dangerous, it should not be allowed, it should be punished. And secondly, to present this as some kind of sky is falling narrative of, oh, our fundamental rights are being denied, is absolutely ridiculous. If we're going to talk about fundamental rights, we're going to talk about the fundamental right to life. That's the right that's articulated very clearly in our Declaration of Independence. That's the right that needs to be defended above all. So, friends, I wanted to point out to you, once again, to summarize in a nutshell how ridiculous this is. The abortionists of Louisiana complain about a law that they could comply with, but the court said also that they literally sat on their hands and did nothing to ask for or obtain those hospital admitting privileges that this law requires. They just assumed that they couldn't get them, or made very, very, very half-hearted and minimal steps to obtain these privileges. They sit back and do nothing. They themselves create the obstacle, which then they want the court to believe the law is creating. And then they march into court claiming to represent the women who are not complaining and whom, in fact, these abortionists are harming. And they say, we don't want this law. They bring it to the Supreme Court. And then their friend Chuck Schumer complains and threatens the justices for how they might rule on this case. This is absolutely an outrage. And brothers and sisters, you and I should speak up about it, make our voices heard, inform our friends and neighbors about what's really going on here, and let's continue to work together for a nation in which we no longer have this atrocity of abortion. Not only the fact that it's legal, but the fact that it is carried out by unregulated, unscrupulous, unqualified abortion practitioners. This is Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life speaking to you today from New York. We'll have a lot more to say to you in the coming days, not only about this case, but about a lot of other things going on in the pro-life movement. Meanwhile, God bless Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. God bless our president who placed them there on the Supreme Court. God bless the Republican Senate who continue to confirm stellar judges just like them to our federal courts all around the country. God bless the pro-life movement who bore witness yesterday in Washington, not only to the rights of the babies, but to the need to protect their mothers, their fathers, their families, and our entire nation. And now may the Lord bless each of you and protect you too, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Now that blessing in a particular way goes to Mary. Mary Booth needs our prayers, everybody. So say those prayers for her. And sometimes, let me say another word here. Just like Schumer is demented, so are many of these folks that comment on abortion on these programs. They don't know the first thing about constitutional law. They don't know the first thing about what's going on inside of the abortion facilities. They don't know the first thing about what an abortion is, what an aborted baby is. They don't know the first thing about any of these things, and yet they shoot off their mouths in such a prideful, arrogant, disrespectful way. It's unbelievable. These people deserve to be called out. These people deserve to be really refuted at every level of our society. You wouldn't believe some of the comments that we get. You see them for yourself if you look through the comments on these programs. But we saw it yesterday in living color out in front of that Supreme Court. Wackos and goons of all different types coming there, and just not a single, I'm going to say this. I was standing right next to this pro-abortion rally yesterday. Not a single one of those protesters could articulate two sentences about what this case is about. They don't know anything about it. Due process, undue burden, strict scrutiny, large fraction test, facial challenge, all these particular constitutional terms that the judges are using to evaluate this law, to evaluate this case. We saw a display yesterday, and some of you saw it too, where you had a bunch of screaming people that made themselves feel good by holding signs saying protect abortion access, and listening to their friends on the lunatic left and the do-nothing Democrats led by Chuck Schumer screaming about fundamental rights. And meanwhile, do they even know what they're talking about? They're holding a sign saying protect abortion access. Okay, so access to expired medications, is that what you want to protect? Access to doctors doing the procedure that they're not qualified to do? Access to a place that doesn't have emergency medical equipment? Is that what you want access to? If that's what they call protecting women, they don't have any regard for women at all. So once again, folks, Father Frank Pavone here. Have a great day, and we will talk to you more about this in the coming days. Meanwhile, go to SupremeCourtVictory.com. That's where you'll find a lot of documentation about this case. You'll be able to read these court briefs and all the different arguments that are going back and forth. You'll be able to understand the case, which is a lot more than you could say for a lot of those protesters yesterday. SupremeCourtVictory.com, you'll also see there the prayer that I invite you to say each day between now and the end of June, when this decision will come down, and we'll pray for the victory of life, for the protection of women, for the protection of our whole nation. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.